Um, I'm just going to fill in the gaps a little bit. My name's Janne Corneil. It's actually Janne, it's a Norwegian name, but no one throughout my whole life has ever been able to pronounce that, so it's Jan. And I was a partner at Sasaki, a big design firm that probably competed for the Union Square project for about 10 years, and 2 years ago started my own little urban design and planning business. And I work on university and city plans. I've been doing that for 20 years. And tonight, so I have a few projects I want to just very high level, because there's no time, it's 8 minutes, I can't describe, I can't get into any detail. I just want to highlight a couple things about each of them. And the main idea that I want to bring home, I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but the success of public space has a lot to do with your ability to keep close by the creative people that occupy and program and work in and play in and live in that public space. And if you end up in a situation where you haven't kind of accommodated some way of keeping the creative, the people that don't have the resources to kind of participate in the new economy, you kind of lose that opportunity. So that's the idea, that what are the tools, and I'm going to talk about the structure of 3 different projects, like the overarching sort of way that they were developed, and some urban design ideas about how you preserve or build in those quirky kind of small-scale spaces within new development, a new district. So we know, Union Square is really rich in people making things and doing things and living here, and it's an incredibly diverse community. And so the point being that you've got a lot here already, so how do you keep that as Union Square kind of takes on all the pressures of redevelopment over the next decades? So the three projects, I'm Canadian, so I just keep going back from and forth, are the Portland State University District in Portland, the new East Baltimore neighborhood in East Baltimore, just at the north doorstep of the Johns Hopkins Medical Center, and South Lake Union in Seattle. Portland State University, 3 years ago, they developed a plan, which I participated in, to rethink the district adjacent to the university. The president, Wim Wiewel, has this extremely strong commitment to creating a new kind of campus that's fully integrated with the city. So the overarching concept was that this new district would have about 40% university uses and 60% other uses. This is a case where a university, as a mission-driven entity, has a role in the redevelopment of the district. It's going to be redeveloped by lots of different developers, some big, some small, but they are also a player. They are committed to developing some of the land uses and the resources that the private sector doesn't think about, because it's not, they're focused on profit mostly. Not everyone, but. So the idea of a campus, a fully integrated campus or university where the lines between the city and the university are somewhat blurred and woven together was a really strong principle that the president and his administration and the faculty were really buying into. So what that meant, the example I like to use is that in a university, the idea of public extends all the way to the locked door of the faculty. But generally, all of the spaces you find in a university, if you are a member of the university, even if you're not a member of the university, you can access. It's part of the public realm. The public realm extends from the outdoor into the major spaces of the whole complex. When you're in a city, the public realm has a pretty a hard stop at the edge of the private buildings that exist at its edges. So the major concept here was, how do we sort of create a model of development that blends those two things? So it's the case of an overarching idea about education and how a university relates to the city that's translated into an urban design idea about the public, the blurring of the public and the private realms. The other big mission-driven part of that university was it's like a hub of sustainability research and thinking, and their whole mandate, everything they do ties back into the green technologies they're trying to develop, the sustainable the programs that they have relative to sustainability. So one of the big parts of this plan was to provide a set of urban design guidelines that aren't about a traditional way you think about urban design guidelines are about, okay, there's a certain dimension, there's a certain ratio of width to height, there's certain heights that relate to pedestrian visibility. So if you have a 50-foot, 55-foot kind of street edge, you probably won't see what's behind. All of those kind of things are sort of like what you, as an urban designer, those are the things you practice when you're working in cities. If your goal is to think about sustainability in the broadest sense, you're going to be thinking about different things. You're going to be thinking about how the rainwater falls and is collected and is reused, and how does that relate to the way you design, the way you guide the design of complexes of buildings. You're going to think about where the north winds come, where the south winds come from, where the warm and the cold winds are. So how do you orient buildings to mitigate the microclimate and make it more comfortable for pedestrians? And you're going to think about things like, well, for example, in Portland, they don't have a minimum parking requirement. They have a maximum parking requirement. So the parking requirements are very low. And in this part of the city, I'm way over 8 minutes, aren't I? Sorry. Anyway, in this part of the city, it's a lot like Union Square. There's transit, there's buses. It's a real hub of transportation. So the principle was that there should be a transit stop on the corner of every block. And that was sort of like a principle that would guide the design of the district. Another place, East Baltimore, and I have less to say about these, so don't worry, I'll probably still be okay. East Baltimore, I worked with the East Baltimore Development, Inc. For about 4 or 5 years in the 2000s. East Baltimore Development, Inc. was set up by the city of Baltimore as a quasi-public development corporation. So that means that it was acting independently. It was a 501c3 organization, but it accessed and worked in a very collaborative way with the city and tapped into their eminent domain tools that the city has. This is a part of Baltimore. This southern edge here is the Johns Hopkins Medical Center, and the area just north of it consisted of endless row houses in really bad shape with incredible disinvestment and vacancy. And this organization was set up to try to take care of the people that were still there, but to redevelop the area, because it was just, it's where the Wire, if you know the series, this is where the Wire was filmed. The row houses ranged from 9 feet to 16 feet wide, 2 to 3 stories, really crappy row houses, like with no foundations and like one brick wall, party wall. So, but nevertheless, it's an historic fabric, and one of the requirements of the redevelopment of the area was that we preserved a certain percentage of historic row houses. So, if you think about that, one way is to say, okay, I've got a block that's pretty good, it's in good shape, or I've got this block and I've got that block that's in pretty good shape. So we're going to work on preserving those blocks. But what we did was we said, the way you experience and understand the historic row houses is along streets. So what we need to do is figure out which streets are, have a good stock of housing that could be preserved, and preserve those streets. So the result of that is that every block has row houses on it. So there are no blocks in this part of the district where you have the full block to redevelop. So you're required from the get-go, you're required to think at the level below the block level. You have to think about alleys, you have to think about a more complex set of relationships between new and old development. South Lake Union, I'm sure you all know about South Lake Union. There, Paul Allen ended up with 15 acres, which I think grew to like 80 acres in the 90s, because he bought the land to build a park, but the public voted it down, and he ended up, I mean, not that it wasn't advantageous for him and his real estate development corporation, but he was a patron of the district, of the city and the district, who's invested enormous amounts of money in that district over the years. But one of the things that we did in the very beginning, which I'm not going to dwell on, but it's the point about the alleys. At the time, a lot of the blocks there was a lot of pressure to close the alleys, and because the alleys created a dimension to the development sites that didn't work for parking. You couldn't quite get 2 bays of parking in a half a block. So there was a lot of pressure to kind of close the alleys and make the block much more sort of palatable for redevelopment. But Paul Allen, when I was working with there in the early 2000s, he bought into the idea that you wanted to kind of maintain that finer grain of the city. So, what happened was that the alleys become a less valuable real estate, where you don't have good views. Your unit, the entrance to your unit is kind of mixed in with the service and the garbage cans and all of that. So anyway, so the whole point being that there are a number of tools that we can use as urban designers, but there are also a number of ways that we can think about an advocacy group or an organization that manages the redevelopment of a district over time. Thank you.